national news talked about a blue wave in 2018, the race to become the next governor of Connecticut played out much closer. No candidate took over 50% of the vote, and Bob Stefanowski was just 3% shy of Ned Lamont's totals. While the latter might have become governor, Stefanowski has vowed to remain vocal, citing issues such as tolls and lagging economic growth. Joining us today to talk about those issues is the 2018 Republican nominee for governor, Bob Stefanowski. The Municipal Voice is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities podcast in collaboration with WNHH LP 103.5 FM. I'm your host, Matt Ford. As always, be sure to give us a like and let us know what you're thinking in the comments. CCM's Municipal Voice podcast continues to present a key forum on important state-local issues. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the consensus views of CCM or our member municipal leaders.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Really appreciate it.
Good to be. So, to start off with, you've seen the recently adopted budget from Governor Lamont.
Yeah.
How would Bob Stefanowski's budget have developed, and how would it have been different?
Well, the biggest thing is we would have cut some cost, I think, when you look at the amount of spending in Connecticut to issue yet another budget with costs going up. Governor Lamont said it was a fair and straightforward budget. It's turned out to not be that. There's a lot of hidden tricks in there.
Yeah.
I don't think the budget is transparent. There's absolutely nothing in this budget that's pro-business. In fact, it's anti-business. And we're seeing the results of that with more and more companies moving out of Connecticut.
Yeah. In a Hartford current article, you said basically strip it down and add back only what you need.
Yeah.
What does Connecticut absolutely need, and what don't we need?
Well, you look at the excesses, and they're not big numbers, but you see what's happening in the Port Authority with nepotism and buying $3,000 photos that are on your iPhone. And I just think there's a culture up in Hartford that they think it's their money, and it's not their money. It's our money. It's taxpayer money, and I think they need to start treating it that way. So I used to throw out the number. If we can't find 5% of savings in the state of Connecticut budget, then we're doing something wrong. On a $20 billion annual budget, that's $1 billion a year that you could use to fund tax cut. And you see examples of it every single day. Governor Lamont hiring his cousin's son at $57,000 a year to be his personal valet. Yeah. It just shows a lack of sensitivity, a lack of awareness that you've got people working two jobs to save for college and afford things, and at the same time, they're living this lavish lifestyle up in Hartford. It's very, very disappointing.
So what would we need? What is the core things that you think we should have there? If we're trimming all the other stuff, what shouldn't be touched?
Well, certainly we should talk about infrastructure. Certainly the infrastructure needs improvement. I don't think we should be doing tolls. There's plenty of money up there. He diverted $175 million from the Special Transportation Fund over to the General Fund, which no one knows really what that's being used for. And I just think we need a discipline about it. Every town, needs good schools. They need to take care of their people. They should be empowered to do that. But government should be smaller, not bigger. And the problem with the state of Connecticut is government is too big, it's too expensive, and too much.
So one of the centerpieces of your campaign was the elimination of the income tax. Some detractors claimed that eliminating income tax would put more pressure on property taxes. This year, we saw property taxes going up across Connecticut. Would your plan have exacerbated those problems?
Well, it's another, the campaigns are interesting because you get kind of these half-truths, and Governor Lamont argued that I was going to raise property taxes and he was going to cut property taxes. It's another broken campaign promise on his part. I think the best way to keep property taxes down is to get home values appreciating, because if you do that, you can keep the mill rate the same and still have enough revenue coming in. And if we could start to grow this economy, we need to grow our way out of the problem that we've had. We've had tax and spend for 40 years. And in terms of the income tax, I got a lot of grief over it. I get it, but I guarantee you we would have gotten the tax rate down. It was over 8 years. It was a phased-in approach, and at least we would have moved the state in the right direction. Governor Lamont largely gets a pass for saying he was never going to toll automobiles. So, the press was on me about the income tax promise. No one's been on him about promising that he'd never put auto tolls in.
Fair enough. You talk about that working through growth. What is the plan in the face of uncertain growth or maybe even another recession coming up? Like if that didn't happen, how do you account for that?
Well, I think it's possible that we're going to hit a recession, but you look at what the national economy has done, you see what tax cuts at the national level have done. One of the reasons we have the rainy day fund in Connecticut is because of the tax policy, and a lot of Connecticut companies repatriated earnings, and because of that, they're paying more taxes. That's why we have surplus. So it's economic growth. There is no way to tax our way. Art Laffer, Ronald Reagan's chief economist, I've known him for 20 years. His favorite saying, you cannot tax your way to prosperity. Connecticut is the perfect example of that. We've been trying to tax our way to prosperity for 40 years, and the economy keeps going down. Why we won't at least try something different? It clearly hasn't worked, raising taxes and increased spending. It hasn't worked for 40 years. So whether you're a supply-side economist or not, why wouldn't we at least try? Because going the other way hasn't worked.
You mentioned the rainy day fund. It's predicted to have more money than it's ever had. How would that factor into your thinking about spending and cutting?
I will say I think it's wise to have a cushion. You could argue that the cushion is too big. Rather than deferring payments on teacher pension plan, which are going to cost you multiples of that in the future, maybe some of that surplus and pay down that liability, because the return on that is very, very powerful, given deferring it is such an expensive thing. Maybe fund a little bit of a tax cut. A surplus means that you've collected more from taxpayers than arguably what you need for the current budget. But we don't even think about that. Heaven forbid we ever give it back to the people that gave it to us. So we need to be balanced about it, because, the economy can turn very quickly. Connecticut has lagged the national economy. So having some element of surplus, I think, is smart.
You mentioned pensions and whatever. The teacher retirement system is a big issue with our membership, and the state tried to push some of that off onto the towns. What are your thoughts on the teacher's pension and how to handle that situation?
The state created the problem. The state promised to fund it. They didn't. You can't pass that problem now down to the towns and cities. It's the wrong thing to do. Again, Governor Lamont said he was going to have no gimmicks in this budget. Well, one of the gimmicks is he pushed the liability out, and that's going to hit on our kids, and our grandkids are going to have to pay a multiple of what that amount is right now. So there's a gimmick in there. He promised he was going to get, quote, concessions from the unions. He tried to get a cost of living adjustment. That lasted about a week before they said no. So a concession from the union, all he really got was a deferral of payments. There's absolutely zero impact on the amount of benefit, the timing of the benefit. All he did was push the payments out even further. Which, when you say you're going to be on a debt diet, which is another one of his proclamations, pushing out obligations is just taking on more debt.
All right. It's a little bit of a follow-up back to one of our core issues. You focus a lot on the income taxes throughout the campaign, and not so much property tax. Do you believe the income tax is a greater burden to Connecticut residents than the property tax?
I think it depends. Obviously, if you're a renter or you're not a homeowner, in hindsight, I probably should have focused more on property taxes. I think the way to do that was to get the economy moving. Right now, we're in a bit of a death spiral. Housing prices are going down. So towns are having to raise the mill rate because the assessed value goes down, and that pushes housing prices down even further. I was very proud that I got the endorsement from the Realtors Association, because they're kind of the canary in the coal mine. They see when these trends are coming. And again, cutting taxes at the state level, and we could have gotten the property taxes down, and we could have gotten it moving in the right direction. And the problem with what we've seen over the 9 months of this Lamont administration is it's more of the same. It's the exact same policy that Dan Malloy. There's more flip-flops with Governor Lamont than under Malloy. I mean, some people, you actually hear them wistfully thinking about Governor Malloy relative to Governor Lamont, but we got to do something to get this economy moving.
Hope so. With the flip-flop, there's a certain amount of figuring out as being new to the job, as a flip-flop. But kind of,
I think that's, part of it is that, but part of it is leadership and accountability. If you look at the grocery tax that was announced last week, the first reaction wasn't the bill was wrong. The first reaction was we needed to make up a deficit. And we need it because restaurants are being unfairly treated relative to prepared foods in grocery stores. In other words, restaurants are being taxed. So we need to tax prepared foods in grocery stores. That's a crazy statement. And then the next day, It's the bill isn't right. So I think this is where this governor gets himself into trouble. Rather than thinking through the response, on one day the answer is A, on the next day the answer is B, and nobody can tell where he stands on anything. And leadership is about consistency and standing up. And by the way, the Department of Revenue Service kind of got thrown under the bus on this one, because if you're governor, you should be looking at the rules coming out of Department of Revenue Service when they're that impactful to middle and low income people on grocery stores. There's no excuse that he didn't review that before it came out.
Fair enough. A similar question we had in the debate. You talked about how a lot of towns manage their funds better than the state. Currently, there's over 1,300 unfunded mandates from the states. What would you have done if you were governor by now? Eliminate them or try to fund them as Osriegel suggested he might?
I would have eliminated them going forward. I mean, and we mentioned on the way in, I was door knocking with Tom Banish, first selectman of Madison yesterday. Madison's AAA rated. We got great schools. We've got housing prices that are holding the line. You look at how Tom Banish manages Madison. Yeah. He could do a better job at the state level right now than what we're seeing at the state level. So some of these towns are doing an extraordinary job. The other thing is, the Democrats like to say they're supporting the big cities, but this tax and spend isn't working. You look at Bridgeport, only 26% of the kids in Bridgeport right now test at the age-appropriate level in math. Yeah. So you got 74% of the kids where we continually throw money at the problem, and it's not getting any better. Yeah. So it's time for school choice. It's time for lower taxes. It's time to get this economy moving.
You just mentioned some of the bigger cities and stuff, and it's been well documented that a lot of the property taxes in our cities is tax exempt. Hospitals, colleges, sort of services that other people need in the area. Places have almost 50% of their property taken off the tax rolls. Should cities be given alternative options to raise revenue?
I'd like to give more empowerment to the cities. You've got payment in lieu of taxes, which picks up some of it, but not all of it. You look at Hartford itself; they're not getting all that money back. I'm big in empowering the local towns, the local cities. Like we just said, in most cases, they're much better, doing a much better job of managing their finances. My goal, had I been up there, was to worry about things at the state level. Give the certainty around funding to the towns and cities, and let those people manage their budgets. They've got a much better sense of the issues. They're much closer to the issues, and they're doing a much better job. And just empower them, let them know, and let them get through it.
Any kind of specific areas you could see where they could maybe raise more revenue or change the setup with the pilot?
Well, I think, one of the things the city should look at is consolidation of back office. Leave it totally up to the cities and towns. But, I think they could do more by working together. The other unfortunate thing this year is because the bonding hasn't been passed, cities and towns are not getting the funding for normal road repair.
Yeah, they're waiting on it.
So again, you've got a governor who says infrastructure is number one priority. We're sitting here in September, and the money hasn't been sent out to the towns and cities to maintain the roads. That leaves them with
missing the season here.
Well, you either pay for it yourself, or it's starting to head in 1 month. You delay it till next year. Yeah. So it's it's another oddity that infrastructure is our number one priority, according to this governor. I would argue it's the economy, but he would argue it's your number one priority. And on that number one priority, you're not giving the money to the towns that they're owed to do maintenance.
Switching gears for a second, Connecticut Republicans generally seem to have a hard time competing in the larger cities. However, cities are major economic drivers across the country right now. Would you have a plan for urban growth and development?
And again, we need to do a better job as Republicans of talking with the cities, because there's this high-level rhetoric that Democrats are in favor of the cities, and for some reason Republicans aren't. You look at the facts in the cities, Bridgeport, Hartford, New Haven are all essentially bankrupt. The education level, we just talked about it, 26% of the kids in Bridgeport age appropriate. So these democratic policies, they're not helping the cities. The way to help the cities is economic growth. I can remember during the campaign in the Puerto Rican Day Parade in Bridgeport, and most of the people coming up to me were saying, get this economy moving, help us get better jobs. And, people don't want to be on social assistance. They want to be working. They want to be productive. And the best way to do that is to lower the tax rate, get companies to come into Connecticut, create jobs, and earn our way out of this problem, rather than trying to subsidize our way out of the problem.
So the growth from tax cuts, do you think the growth will come, or is there any other kind of specific policies we want to put in place that encourage growth in the cities?
I think cutting taxes. I think we need more accountability around education spending. I think I think the funding should follow the child. Right now, it follows the schools, and you're subsidizing some schools that are not very good. If you were to give that money to the parents and say, you pick where your child wants to go. Do they want to go to a pilot school? Do they want to go to a private school? Do they want to go to the public schools? And let the free market determine what the best schools are.
And so it's sort of a performance-based sort of thing, or just
let the student choose. Amistad Academy here in New Haven, they do a terrific job with kids. I toured through the campaign. So I think it's a mixture of public schools and private schools and magnet schools and charter schools, and give the student and his or her parents the ability to choose where they go. Mm-hmm. And that'll migrate people to the good schools, and it'll either make the poorer schools, get their game together, or they won't be there anymore.
You were listening to the Municipal Voice on WNHH LP 103.5 FM New Haven. Your opposition to tolls is well documented. It's a big issue for a lot of people. Do you think it has a transportation crisis? And if so, how should we do it?
Well, we didn't have a crisis until Governor Lamont diverted the auto tax on new car sales from the transportation fund to the general fund. He diverted it. It was $175 million. He diverted it, and then the minute later, he said, well, the transportation fund is bankrupt. So there's enough money up there to do it. Mm-hmm. There's enough bonding capacity at Hartford. If we stopped some of the pet projects that bonding capacity is used for, which are nice to have, but start to allocate it towards what's critical, which is fixing our crumbling roads and bridges, I think we'd be better off. So there's ample money up there right now to fix the infrastructure. I don't think we should be making a land grab to the residents of Connecticut for even more money. Basically, if you looked at that new car sales tax, that would have generated $1 billion over the next several years. If you had just left that alone, coincidentally, it's the amount of money Governor Lamont wants to raise through tolls. Mm-hmm. So once again, he diverts that money, he sends it into this black hole of a general fund, uses it for whatever he wants, and then comes back at the taxpayers again for another $1 billion to pick it up.
So tolls you just don't think would work?
I don't think we can need tolls. The latest proposal last Friday is we get some federal funding, which is probably a good idea, and then we just have toll bridges. If we allow one gantry, we open that door, we're going to have tolls throughout the state within the next 3 to 5 years. It's been proven in other states, because you go in, you say, well, it's going to be bridges. The next day, it's certain roads. You cannot open that door to one gantry, and Republicans need to stay firm on this. Because all they want to do is jar that door open a little bit, get a couple gantries up, and then it's game over. They'll be all across the state.
I've seen it in other states, and Massachusetts, New York, all have tolls on their roads. Truckers coming through, is Connecticut missing out? If they're getting their piece on either side of us, and we're not getting it here, are we missing out?
That's the argument. But first of all, the scope of the tolls in those states is not anywhere near what Governor Lamont is proposing for Connecticut. You need a lot of tolls to raise $1 billion. The out-of-state traffic coming through Connecticut, you hear different estimates, but I would say it's probably no more than 30%. 70% of that tolling is going to fall on the residents of Connecticut, and we're already the second highest taxpayers in the entire country. Yeah. People need to work to May 21st just to pay their tax bill. After May 24th, the money is yours.
5 months a year.
So to layer another tax on one of the most highly, and that's what a toll is, on one of the most highly taxed states in the entire nation, when we've proven over the last 40 years that more taxes don't work, is the wrong thing to do. And there's enough money up there to deal with it if they just allocated it properly.
All right. When we talk about the roads and the tolls and the need for upkeep on the infrastructure, but specifically, how important do you think public transportation is, it's being successful and on time, buses, trains, etc., to the state's economy, and how would we ensure that?
Absolutely. I mean, after this session, I'm getting up to New York. It'll probably take me 2 hours.
I've been right here in Union City.
Yeah. You saw several weeks ago, the train broke down. People were on the train for 7 hours. The heat got so bad they had to break out emergency water and hand it to passengers. So we absolutely need to do that on the rail lines. We need to work across Massachusetts and New York, because obviously it's a multi-state problem. But again, look at the spending that's been done. Rather than spending it on Metro North, they do the bus to nowhere up in New Britain. Which is a crazy amount of spend per mile, and there's about 20% capacity on these buses. So it's not about investing in infrastructure. It's about investing smartly, and we don't always do that.
Where you put it rather than how much.
I mean, to get the tall vote in Bridgeport, Governor Lamont promised a $200 million train station in Bridgeport. Why does Bridgeport? Maybe you upgrade what you have, but that's the other thing that you start to see is you start to see favors to certain elected officials to vote on a bill, and that's not right either.
All right. So recently, I know your wife was elected to the Republican State Executive Committee.
State Central, yeah.
And the post called you one of the highest profile voices for conservative Republicans in Connecticut. But last time when you ran for governor, you kind of went around the process and skipped the party convention altogether. Going forward, would you support the state party nomination process?
I think right now what both Amy and I are trying to do is we had 650,000 people vote for us. Mm-hmm. And I get it, we lost, but I owe it to those people to stay vocal.
Yeah.
This governor came in and promised he wasn't going to toll automobiles. He is. He promised he was going to get property taxes down. He's not. He promised he wasn't going to raise taxes. He's raised taxes by $1 billion. I have the benefit or the curse of having been up on the debate stage with him 5 times where he made these promises. He told me actually I was misrepresenting his position on tolls when I said he's going to put them up. Yeah. So I'm going to do everything I can. Amy is now the chair of the Madison Republican Town Committee. She's on State Central. I've been trying to support candidates. These elections this fall are very, very important because these local elections actually have more input on your daily life than the statewide election in terms of property taxes, mill rates. I think the fall is the first time, it's our first opportunity to send a message to Hartford that we don't like the direction of the state and we can get some Republican legislators in here. In terms of the party, they've been very supportive. I mean, it was a bit of a bruising primary with 12 of us, but I have to tell you, every candidate after the primary was supportive. J.R. Romano was supportive, and anything I can do to help the party going forward, I'm happy to do.
Talk about the upcoming stuff. Any local races that you find particularly interesting or you're watching?
Well, I'm very curious about Madison. Tom Danish, we've had Governor Lamont was strolling through Madison just coincidentally 3 weeks ago. He actually went to my barbershop. So he went in there. Susan Vicevich has been out doing a fundraiser. We need to keep Madison. And tonight I'm doing a fundraiser in West Haven. That's a key race with Michelle Bagherio running for mayor. But all of these towns are important. We got to get them, get some seats back in these local towns and cities.
Final big question everyone wants us to ask. 2022.
Yeah.
Will we see Bob Stefanowski on the ballot again?
I honestly don't know. I mean, 2 years is a long time. It's actually 3 years, but you need to start preparing in 2 years. Right now, and I gave this governor a chance. I think a lot of people did. I think if you look back at my concession speech in the first few weeks, I was very supportive. But when he came out on day 38 and dropped an editorial in the Connecticut Post saying he changed his mind on auto taxes, that's when I felt I had to get involved again. Because that was a fundamental promise that he made that he broke after 38 days. So either he never intended to keep the promise or he learned something new, but either way, there should have been an apology. There wasn't one. So I'm going to do everything I can to support the 650,000 people, and we'll see where the cards are in 2-3 years.
In whatever capacity that takes in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to stay active. Whether I run for statewide office again, I don't know right now. I honestly don't know. People say I am because I'm so vocal. But the reason I'm being vocal is to support all those people, those hardworking people in Connecticut. They deserve a voice. So I'm going to do everything I can.
Excellent. Well, thanks for talking with us.
Thanks for having me, and I really appreciate it.
The Municipal Voice is a co-production by CCM and WNHH 103.5 FM. Kevin Maloney is our executive producer. Christopher Gilson is our producer. Harry Grouse on the boards. And I'm Matt Ford, your host. Be sure to check out our Facebook page and give us a like. And watch out for our CCM chat series on our YouTube page. Just search for CCM chats and I'll find them all in one convenient playlist. CCM's Municipal Voice podcast continues to present a key forum on important state-local issues. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the consensus views of CCM or our member municipal leaders.
Hi, I'm Claudia LaBelle, CCM's communications intern. Today we'll be visiting New Milford to speak with Mayor Peter Bass about Harrybrook Park, where they've recently brought back peacocks.
Thank you for being on CCM.
Thanks for having me today. Appreciate it, Claudia. Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about the history of the land Harrybrook Park is on and how the land was acquired by the people?
Sure. So basically, Frank and Elizabeth Harden had this as their second home. Their first home was down in Manhattan, and they bought the property in 1941 and lived there until about 1965. And then they turned over Harrybrook Estate to the people of the town of New Milford.
What makes Harrybrook Park special to New Milford?
What makes it special to New Milford is all the wonderful things that it does. It's part of our community. For events that it does, to the wonderful attributes that it does. Just a special place for our citizenry to go, walk around, see the wonderful things that we have, including the peacocks that have come back.
Great. So could you tell us a little bit about the peacocks and the history behind them?
Absolutely. So the Hardens had the peacocks for years. They were actually in the park till I believe the early 80s, and then they went away. About a month ago, the new board of directors of Harrybrook Park and Bill Buckby brought the peacocks back. So there is a male and a female. And actually the female, I believe, has laid 4 eggs now. So it's a wonderful thing to see. If you do go to Harrybrook Park, make sure you check out the peacocks. It's a great new addition, or actually added addition that used to be there, back to the park.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
About how many people visit the park a year?
That would be in the thousands. We get people from as far away as Maine, Florida. When they come to visit, they hear about this wonderful park, as well as our regular residents and residents from our neighboring towns. Could be from Roxbury, Washington, Kent, Sherman, and New Milford residents. So it makes it not only a town jewel, but also a regional jewel as well.
So you mentioned some of the events that are hosted in the parks. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So they host all sorts of events there. They host their events from weddings that they do to events where they'll do a cross-country type of activity, to push-ups and sit-ups, everyday activities, to they've done barbecues up there, music. They do a whole host of things as well. You can also see the Harden House. It also has wonderful paintings that the Hardens left, as well as it's still in its 1970s state, as if the Hardings were still living there. So it's a beautiful thing to come and check out.
Great. Is there an event that's particularly special to you?
You know, they have lots of events, but my favorite, I want to make sure that I get this right, it's Who Are You Carrying is the name of the event. It's an event that's dedicated to veterans, and it's also dedicated to those veterans living in the area that have lost their lives. So it deals with a lot of flags, ceremony, as well as some physical activity as well. So it's always kind of a special thing in my heart is when they do that. So it's wonderful. And I can't thank the park for doing that.
That's great. With the land formerly being the Harden Estate, it's a long history there. Do you see a bright future for the park?
Absolutely do. As more and more people are interested in our recreational components here in New Milford, and with their board of directors that they have, and all the new nuances and enhancements they put in there, I see a very long life for that. And I can't thank the board, I can't thank Director Buckby enough for taking charge of that park and making it the jewel that it is today for our town.
That's awesome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's good seeing you.
Can we do the beginning of question 2 again?
Yes.
The audio dropped out, and then can you ask a question about the peacock?
Oh yeah, I had that. I skipped over that accidentally.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Because that's
something unique about
Yeah.
Harrybrook.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely love the peacock information.
So the beginning of.
Question 2, the audio just kind of got dropped out a little bit.
Okay.